10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2. Cześć. Hello, this is Jason. I'm still working on my project Daenerys. I decided to import some stock animation from one of the old libraries that I have called Digital Juice. There are many different animation and stock footage libraries out there today, and you can still use them with the old systems, like the system I'm working on now. I'm going to show you how to choose some assets, export them using the Juicer tool, and then import them on Daenerys in Movie Shop. Over on the left-hand side, you can browse through all the different assets. They have them categorized: animations, projects and templates, film and video, stock footage clips, music and sound effects, photos and still graphics, fonts. These fonts are sort of like the old Cara fonts on Amiga, so if you're familiar with those, they're really fancy fonts. It's not your standard Helveticas and Arials. In the animation group, there are Jumpbacks, Editor's Toolkit, Editor's Toolbox, Motion Design Elements, Swipes, Power Cuts, Motion Designer's Toolkit, Animated Canvases, Animated Transitions and Wipes, Animated Revealers. So some of these are just background animations. Some of these have alpha channels and can be used as overlays. Some of these are different sorts of wipes and transitions with alpha channels. And all of this stuff can be used inside Movie Shop. What I want to do today in showing how to transcode all this and prepare it for Movie Shop is also do a test to see what sort of field order the VLab-Motion card is using. Field order is important in standard definition NTSC and PAL. I'll just be testing NTSC today. That's what all my projects are going to be in. I've already pre-selected some animations that I want to try out. Part of the editor's theme kit. I'm looking for theme kit number 94, paint cans. And I can choose SD or HD. I'm just going to go with the SD. It'll be less processing time. And when you click on any one of the assets, in the browser section in the center of the Digital Juicer application, you can see a visual representation. So I have backgrounds, I have some overlays. This black area would be keyed out. Lower thirds, again, there's an alpha channel there. Swipes are another name for Digital Juice's transitions, animated wipes. So these paint cans would sweep across the screen, and you'd have an alpha channel. And they have a category 2 for just the mats, the alpha channel masks, and sound effects. Each of the swipes, the transitions, come with, I think, a choice of 2 sound effects that are paired up with it. You don't have to use those, but they're there. Sometimes they sound nice, they enhance the effect. I want to go into the backgrounds. And when you click on one, it begins animating, so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Moving in a few different directions. Okay. To test the VLab-Motion card to determine what field order it uses for interlace video, I'm going to, I think, pick these 2. So this one, the paint cans are scrolling down the screen, the camera's sort of flying over them. And You'll notice problems with your interlace field order when you have movement. So maybe this movement will help reveal what field order the VLab-Motion card is employing. This second animation goes a little bit faster. So we had one direction of movement on the first animation, and the second one goes zipping by at different rates. For testing purposes, I'm going to drag 3 of each one of these animations into my output queue. All right, I've got 3 of each. Why 3? The first one I'm going to output as a progressive field order. The second one is going to be upper field first. The third one is going to be lower field first. When I play back these in Movie Shop using the VLab-Motion card, what you'll see is with progressive animations, you just get the 30 frames per second. That's great. But if you want a slightly smoother look to your animations, then you can render something in proper field order for the hardware you're using, and you'll get 60 fields per second. Each frame of video is comprised of 2 interlaced fields. They're broken up into odd and even lines. Odd lines in NTSC and PAL will be drawn on the screen. Then the electron beam will go back to the top and it will fill in all the even lines. So each time it's sweeping the screen, you're drawing half of the overall frame, just one field, then filling it in with the next field, which is slightly forward in time. So you're drawing 2 fields in the same time increment as you get one complete frame. You can get smoother motion with these 60 fields per second than you can with just 30 progressive frames per second. That's great in the days of NTSC and PAL video on CRTs. So, showing something old school here. And we're going to test VLab-Motion to see whether it's using upper field first order or lower field first order. There's no set standard. It can vary from one hardware device to the next. And we're going to see what works best for VLab-Motion. So once I have everything in the queue, I can click on one of these and then hit Settings up at the top. And this takes me to my preview panel. I can see my animation and play it back in a larger frame. And I've been experimenting with settings before, so I have a couple presets. I'm going to use the Daenerys 640 by 480p fit VLM. And on the right side in Juicer, I'm going to say apply to all. Let's take a look at the settings on the side here. I loaded my preset. I applied it to all my animations in the current queue. In the canvas section, I want 640 by 480. And I'm going to leave the setting for pixel aspect ratio. That's fine for SD. Frame rate, like I said earlier, it's technically 29.97 for NTSC video. That's what I'm going to use. There's a start and duration setting. I can see that this animation is 10 seconds long. If I wanted to, I can have Juicer render extra frames. And it just makes these frames up or subtracts frames to go faster or slower. And if I chose a different speed, I can have frame blending. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use the base frame rate, the base length. Under the layer, I do want to change this setting. It says auto scale to canvas. I want it to stretch to fit. I'm not sure why that didn't save in my preset. It squeezes the whole animation into my 640 by 480. Down under the output settings, for the first animation, it's going to be progressive. In the field order, I have selected that. I'm going to use a JPEG sequence. Movie Shop can't import a QuickTime file or any sort of animation file directly. It needs a series of frames all broken up. In Juicer, I can export that series here, and I've selected JPEG sequence. So my JPEG sequence is outputting frames starting 0, 1, 2, 3, and they're all numbered. There's no alpha channel associated with this, so that's ghosted out. You can change the output folder, and you can change the names, the base name used. I'm just going to call this Theme 94 Paint Cans 1. And it's going to append a numerical sequence to each of these names. Looking at the next one, I'm going to do the same thing here, stretch to fit. Now I'm going to change the field order to upper. Those are the odd frames first. I'll change the output name. Paint Cans 1 upper. Let's go back to the first one. I forgot to put progressive. And it looks like I didn't hit enter either when I retyped the name before. Paint Cans 1 progressive. Okay, that one is stretched to fit, JPEG sequence. The second one is upper field, odd frames first, stretched to fit, the name applied. Third one, need to do the same thing, stretch to fit, change the field order to lower even. Paint Cans 1, we'll go with lower, hit enter. And I need to do the same thing with the other 3 for the second animation. When you're done with your settings, you can come back over to the batch panel, your output queue. You can click render selected if you want to do an individual item, or if you had selected 3 of these 6. I'm just going to do render all to do everything in the output queue. And Digital Juice will ask me for the correct disk. If there are multiple disks, it will ask for them in sequence. Before you can import your assets into Movie Shop, you need to prepare it by transcoding, which we did using the Juicer 3 application. We also need to use a proper file naming convention. Movie Shop, when it looks for a sequence of images, it's expecting to see a 4-digit appendage at the end of a file name. It won't correctly recognize .jpeg at the end of the name. Movie Shop will look at the metadata in the image file header to determine what format it is and whether it recognizes that format. But for an image sequence, it's reading the file name only. If it sees .jpeg at the end of a file name and not the number, it does not properly interpret that as an image sequence. We need to remove the .jpeg, and I'm using a program I found or was recommended to me a long time ago called FF FF_rename. I don't remember where I got it, but if you search for it, you can find something or a similar type of application. I like this one because I can drop a folder in it and then completely remove the JPEG extension first. In the macOS, you can select a folder of images and you can rename a whole batch of them if you want. It's pretty easy. The one thing that I need and didn't find using the macOS native solution was the elimination of the extension. So I need to get rid of that JPEG extension, and this FF_rename application will do that for me. So I select remove extension, clicked rename, and now you can see all of the files have been renamed. And that's part one. Okay, step two, now that I have the extension removed, I need to change the base name. MovieShop is expecting a 4-digit number at the end of the sequence naming. So what I'm going to do is tell it to find E_00, and I'm going to replace that with E_0. Why E_00? Sometimes if I just want to remove _0, it might rename the beginning of a file name depending on what the file name is. So you may have the same pattern repeated elsewhere. I'm just making a larger pattern that is more unique to the section of the file name that I want to rename. So it's going to remove two of the zeros, the underscore, and it's going to replace it with a period, a dot, and just a single zero. So when I hit rename, boom, I have theme _094 paintcans2 progressive, and my properly formatted file extension, period, and 4 numeric digits. That will make MovieShop happy for sequence importing. I need to do this for the other 5 animations, and then I'm going to transfer those files to Daenerys on a CDRW. Now it's time to do some transferring. I apologize for the extra noise in the background. I have some other things going on. I'm going to transfer all my animation sequences to MovieShop using a CDRW. So I'm using Toast 19 Pro. This is a Macintosh Pro circa 2010. A big old cheese grater running High Sierra. I want to burn an ISO image. And let's call it Paint Cans. So I want a new CD. I'm going to use my Paint Cans name. Then I'm going to drag and drop my 6 animations I just created, the progressive, the upper, and the lower field versions of the 2 different paint can animation sequences. One important thing to note is I have these really long file names, and that can be a problem if you don't have these settings correct. So going under settings for my ISO 9660, the naming defaults to Joliet standard, which is usually more limited than I like. What I'll do is go in here and tell it to allow Macintosh file names, and the Amiga will read that just fine. Amiga supports very large file names as well. So this way nothing is going to get truncated. It's not going to screw up my numerical appendage on the file names. So that part's really important. I selected the ISO 9660 as my standard file system format. The Amiga, if you have a CD file system installed with your OS, then you should be able to read that just fine. If you're using one of the older versions of Amiga OS, you probably can't read the standard DVD UDF format. The way I got around that in the past was just to use this ISO 9660 format with a DVD disc. When I pop that into my DVD drive on the Amiga, the OS just looks at that as one big 4+ gigabyte CD. With the newer OS that I installed on the Amiga 4000, AmigaOS 3.2.2.1, that version can read UDF format, so I wouldn't have to do that. But I'm still in the habit of going to this as my default, whether I'm using CDs or DVDs. Then I hit burn, and it asks for a disk. I put in a disk and burn, then I take it over to the Amiga. I'm going to take my DVD with my paint can animation sequences, pop it into the Amiga. And it's reading. Okay, I can see that all the files retain their name, so I got everything correct when I was setting it up in Toast. Close that out. Let's open up Movie Shop. Open the project I've been working on. Everything in my scene list, if you watched my previous video, you could see that I was sorting things, doing a little bit of import and organization. I have quite a bit of stuff in here right now. So what appears in an orange is a group of scenes. Scenes are Movie Shop's terminology for clips, animation clips, video clips. For audio files, Movie Shop calls those samples. This scene list showing all my clips is akin to bins on some other nonlinear edit systems. So all of this is organized in Movie Shop in a manner that's similar to a file directory. Each of these orange groups are like folders. So I can click on this folder, and inside that folder I can have nested subfolders, each one with its own name. I can click through them. These are all mostly still images. I have a few animations, one that I showed last time. I showed a T-Rex last time. Let's just play this dragon clip. Show a dragon animation this time. So what Movie Shop is doing right now during this rather lengthy pause, it's filling up an internal video buffer, and then it's going to play back the animation in real time. It will stream in real time from directly from the media drive. I just happen to set an obscenely large video buffer, and it takes a little bit longer to fill that up. If you use a smaller video buffer, the response time between pressing play and seeing something happening can be instantaneous. So you can see this flying dragon. It's 30 frames per second, 24-bit, No stuttering, really beautiful quality. And let's hit stop. At the top of my scene window, I have parent and root. Parent will take me up one level. If I'm several levels deep and I want to jump back up to the top, root takes me all the way back to the beginning of my project. When I want to bring in something new, like the paint can animation sequences, I need to go to my edit window. I need to click on new. That's creating a new container, a new scene container for whatever it is I'm going to bring into Movie Shop. Whether I'm digitizing from a videotape source, a deck, a camera, whatever it is, or if, as in this case, I'm importing something, it needs to go into a new container. If I don't create that, what may happen, what does happen in Movie Shop is whatever was last selected, that's going to receive the new data. So if I still had that dragon animation up, and then I began importing my paint can sequence, it would append that paint can sequence to the dragon animation, or it may insert the paint can sequence anywhere within the dragon animation, depending on where the playhead was on the clip at the time that I initiated the import. That's a common mistake that may happen to you. It's easy to fix. You don't have to re-import it. You can just trim it off and put it into a new clip after the fact. Just something to be aware of when you're doing imports and digitizing media inside Movie Shop. So I select my unnamed container. I use right Amiga I, the keyboard shortcut. I'm looking at my CD, and let's start off with the first paint cans animation and the progressive version of that. If I scroll through here, I can see I have 300 frames starting from 0 going up to 299. It may be a little difficult to see on this video, but at the top of the file requester window, it's telling me something important. It says import frames start. If I click on a frame with a numerical number on it and hit OK, then it's going to ask me to select the end frame. I can also just double click on this and it will jump to import frame end, asking me how much of this do I want to bring in. That's another important consideration. I can do all 300 frames at once, or I could import this in segments. Maybe I am pressed for time and I want to do part now, part later. So I might go 0 to 100, save my project, go off to work or whatever, come back, and then import the second half. And I can append that second half to the first half of my clip. You know, pick up where I left off. It's really convenient. I'm just going to go ahead for today and set my end frame to number 299. Hit OK. Now Movie Shop is plugging away. It's doing 2 imports, 2 passes on every file that it's reading in. So Movie Shop works in fields, and it stores things internally on its media drives in a field system. So it looks at my first JPEG file and it reads it, and it only grabs half of it, then it reads it again, grabs the second half for the second field. And what we're doing with this test today with progressive upper and lower field-based sequences is trying to determine what MovieShop and the VLab-Motion card is using for its field order. That's not something that's always documented on your hardware. You just have to test it or find out the hard way. Different hardware can use different field orders. In the lower corner, I have a window open that I didn't have before. And that's displaying some info about what's being imported or what's being played back. In the display info window, you can see the current project quality setting. This is a JPEG quality setting. I'm currently using 70%. And the more important bit here is the bitrate information. Right now, as it's importing, it's reading 1.34 megabytes per second. You want to keep that number below 2 megabytes per second. That's the Zorro 2 limitation. You might be able to eke a little bit more than that or a little bit less. You're better off staying under 2 megabytes per second. And one way to do that is to change the project quality setting, the JPEG quality setting. If I had bumped this up to 80%, then my byte rate, megabytes per second, data rate would rise as well, getting closer to 2 megabytes. So what you want to do when you're setting up your VLab-Motion nonlinear edit system, you want to get the fastest components you can saddled on either side of your Zorro bus so that you can always kind of maintain that peak performance across the Zorro 2 barrier bottleneck. On a fast Amiga system with an 060 processor, fast SCSI-II bus, fast SCSI-II drive, you can probably push MovieShop or the VLab-Motion system up to 80. I've done some projects at 85%. One thing that you might have noticed that I haven't mentioned yet is that I am not using the CoolIO wedge application. CoolIO is useful with Amiga applications that don't recognize a broad range of image formats for importing. CoolIO will be able to sit in between your file and your application, in this case MovieShop. And if I wanted to give MovieShop a sequence of PNG files or a sequence of TIFF files or Photoshop files, I can do that as long as I have the AmigaOS 3.x datatypes installed for those particular file formats. And I do have a bunch of different data types installed for common image formats, modern image formats. And if I have something MovieShop will not import natively, I can use CoolIO to translate that into an Amiga IFF 24-bit depth file that MovieShop will gladly accept. It will take a little bit longer. So what you may notice today compared to the previous video where I was using CoolIO, in this one the import is zipping along much faster. It doesn't have that translation stage. And I'm pulling this right off of the CDRW. Okay, I've imported a bunch of stuff, not just my paint cans, but I do have the both sets of paint cans imported. I have them in separate groups within another group. So if I go back up to my root directory, my top level scene list, I made a group called Animated Backgrounds. Inside that, I have a film strip countdown. I have my paint cans. I have 2 versions that we're going to use for field testing. This was another one I considered that I kind of liked because it was very colorful. This Easter egg, dyed egg sequence. Let me just play that. You can see what this looks like. And I should really go into settings and change my buffer size. And I said that last time, but I didn't do it yet. Maybe for the next video, I'll go into settings, show you some of that, and do a quick change. So there it is. Colorful eggs sliding sideways. This one was transcoded, rendered out in progressive rather than upper or lower field. So what you're seeing is just 30 frames per second playback. And if I look down in the right corner at my display window, it's not even hitting 1 megabyte per second. We're about 800 kilobytes per second. So we can stop that now. We've seen enough. This is the first paint can animation. It's a loopable animation that's 10 seconds long. And the first one that I'm playing is the progressive version. There we go. I may cut out some of those lengthy load delays as it's filling up the buffer. So you get all the vibrant colors, some nice chrome cans with reflections on them. This looks really good. Even at 70% JPEG quality, this looks really nice. When Movie Shop is doing a lot of calculation internally, if you're doing a lot of layering, a lot of transitions, a lot of compositing, everything internally is done in 24-bit calculations. So it's preserving as much data integrity as possible. That doesn't really tell us anything for our field order test. It's just an example of what progressive playback looks like. Now I'm selecting the lower field first, and we'll see if we notice anything. The lower field first are the even lines. It's really hard to tell. You probably can't tell on the YouTube video. There's nothing that really jumps out. So there might be a little bit fuzziness to it. Lower field first wasn't really definitive. We'll try the upper field first to see if there's any difference. We're loading the buffer now, filling the buffer up. Oh, there we go. Maybe this one's a little bit sharper. Again, I'm not seeing anything that really stands out to me. To my eye, it looks like it might be a little bit sharper. The movement in this image sequence, might be slow enough so that incorrect field order doesn't jump out at you. You will see it. You'll definitely see it when there's faster movement than this. So maybe this animation isn't the one we really need to make our determination. Let's stop that. We'll go up to the main directory. Let's take a look at the second test. We'll start off with the progressive version, so you can see that. This one is a little bit longer. It's 15 seconds. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take 15 seconds to load everything. It's filling up the available buffer. I have a lot of memory on this machine. So there we go. We got a lot of movement. Variable speed. So while it's working within the buffer, it's still reading data off the drive. And just below our scene window, kind of at the bottom center, there's this other window that shows on the right side a column how full my audio drive is. Not very full at all. The video drive is the middle one. There's a V and an A marking each of these icons below. I have a lot of space left. The item on the far left of this window is the one that's important during digitizing and playback. And as long as it stays in the green, you're good. You're reading your data fast enough, pushing it through the Zero bus fast enough to maintain that 30 frames per second. If it starts dropping into the yellow, then it's starting to get slower. And if it bottoms out at red, you've exceeded your limit. So that's enough for this one. Let's take a look at the upper field first animation. We'll load that one. See if that plays smoothly. If this has the correct field order, then with that fast motion, it should look a little bit smoother than the progressive version of the animation. Okay, that does look pretty good. You might not notice on the YouTube video. I think that looks a little bit nicer than the progressive version. This can be important when you're working in Lightwave or Imagine 3D or another 3D application. Those programs have an option for when you're rendering the output for a field order setting. So if you wanted to render something in Imagine or Lightwave and have it look extra smooth on a standard definition NTSC or PAL system, then correct field order would be important. Okay, we played through that enough. Now, let's take a look at the lower field first and see what happens. Loading, loading, loading. Okay, hopefully you can see something different here. There's a lot of sort of stuttering. Not so much noticeable when you're doing this slow movement, but as soon as it goes fast, sideways, up, down, whichever direction it's moving, when it's moving fast, you can see that this is incorrect field order. Yeah, definitely. So, based on this animation, I can clearly say that the VLab-Motion card is using upper field first field order. for its NTSC video. If I mixed it up and I'm using lower field first, you can see what's happening here. So all the field orders on a temporal sense should progress in time smoothly, one field after the other. But when you reverse the field order, as in this lower field first example, what's happening is I'm playing one field, and then the field that comes next is actually on the timeline an image that should come before it, and then it plays, it jumps forward in the future on the timeline, and then it jumps back, then it jumps forward, then it jumps back. So it's jumping forward and back throughout the animation, and with little to no movement in the frame, you might not notice that happening at all. But with large movements like this, it's immediately apparent. So the first animation test we did was too slow, too smooth movement, just too slow movement to really stand out as incorrect field order. But I think the one lower field first did look a little bit fuzzier to my eye. It just wasn't very conclusive to me. But this one is conclusive with the greater motion. So there you go. Movie Shop and VLM, at least for NTSC standard definition video, is using upper field first. If you're importing an animation, I would recommend either sticking with progressive if you don't know what your system's using. Okay, I zoomed in tighter on my output monitor. Maybe you can better see the stuttering effect when there's a lot of fast motion happening. Some of the noise you're seeing on the camera is due to the shutter frame rate versus the monitor display. But look at the edge of the paint cans as it's zipping by. It's really disturbing to look at with the naked eye on the monitor. For comparison, I also zoomed in on the correct field order animation. It's playing the upper field first version. Hopefully this comes across a little bit better. Hopefully. But to the naked eye, this is definitely cleaner. It doesn't have that stuttering. One final thing I want to show you is an animation that I imported that has an alpha channel. I did mention that you can use things with alpha channels. So these are all from the Digital Juice library, animations that I previously transcoded and transferred on a CDRW. And if I go into the electric arc wipe, what you'll see here are two different animations. One has the color image, and I can step through this frame by frame. Every once in a while you get like a random glitch when you're doing stepping through by frames. Don't worry too much about that unless there's something corrupted. So this is a very quick wipe. It's just under 2 seconds long. Boom. I think we do have a glitch file in this one. Here you can see the transparency mask, the matte, the alpha channel. And this would be applied using operators within Movie Shop that I'll do a later time. This is also just under 2 seconds. You can see the fire drop down, and then there's the associated alpha channel traveling mat that goes with this. So I would, in Movie Shop, I would put this on my top layer. I would have my video clips underneath it, and to define the transparency, I would use the alpha channel version of the animation along with a Movie Shop calls them operators that you apply. Sometimes in other applications they might be called filters. So if you're working in Final Cut, you have a whole folder of different filters that you can apply to your video clips. Movie Shop just calls those operators. This one just shows a few different currencies from around the world. Now what I'm showing you is a little bit different. I didn't go into my group within the scene list. So I just selected the group as it is. And when you do that, what happens in Movie Shop, it will play whatever's contained within that group sort of back to back. So in this folder, this group that I have for my currency wipe, the first clip, first scene within that group happens to be the colored animation. You see that coming down, and then you see that followed by the transparency. And it looks like there's something else in there. Oh, there's an extra matte file in here as well. So as these drop across the screen, usually with an animated wipe, there will be one or a few frames that completely obscure what's on the lower layers of the video. So that's where your cut would normally happen. In this one, as the symbols are being dropped, there's no point at which the symbols completely cover the frame. You're always going to see the underlying video. So this particular wipe in Digital Juice has the wipe animation itself. It has the associated alpha channel for that wipe to determine transparency on the wipe. And then it has this special mask that does a transition wipe across the underlying video. Instead of a hard cut, you have this transitional wipe that's applied. So it starts out on say, clip A. It's solid white here in the matte. And then this is the transition going to solid black, clip B. And I'm just scrubbing back and forth in the scene control window. So that gets applied to your lower video clips, and then the other two are used to put the overlay on top. In this case, the overlay is the wipe, but it could also be one of the lower thirds that you saw in the Digital Juice application in the browser, or an overlay. So it's quite flexible with what you can do, and I will show the setup for that at a later time in a different video. This video is just another step showing how I'm importing things, different kinds of things in my project, and how Movie Shop is working. Dziękuję za oglądanie. Thank you for watching. See you next time.